There comes a time in everyone's journey where the path ahead is not found by adding more, but by removing what no longer serves. Growth is not always about accumulation, it is about elimination. What you remove determines what remains, and what remains defines who you truly are. To live with clarity, you must learn the silent art of letting go, not loudly, not in anger, but quietly. Elimination is not destruction, it is purification. When you remove the unnecessary, the essential has space to breathe. Let us explore 10 things you must quietly eliminate from your life if you wish to walk in peace, purpose, and strength. In the modern world, many believe that self-improvement means constantly adding more skills, more possessions, more experiences, more information. We chase endlessly, thinking that fulfillment lies in accumulation. Yet the paradox of true growth is that it rarely comes from adding but rather from removing. The great masters across all traditions have spoken of this truth: what you subtract reveals who you are. The process of elimination is not a loss, it is a cleansing. Just as a sculptor does not add clay to create form but removes what is unnecessary from the stone, so too must we carve away the illusions, distractions, and burdens that hide our essence. The act of removing is sacred because it is the return to simplicity, to what is essential, honest, and alive. When you begin to see life through this lens, you realize that every layer you shed brings you closer to authenticity. The idea of purification through elimination is not only physical but deeply psychological and spiritual. The mind, when left unchecked, becomes a crowded room filled with endless thoughts, fears, and desires. We often feel exhausted not because life is inherently difficult, but because our minds are overfilled with noise. Every worry, every comparison, every unspoken regret adds to that weight. By quietly eliminating these unnecessary mental patterns, you create space for clarity. Think of your consciousness as a lake. When stirred by countless distractions, it becomes muddy and chaotic. But when left undisturbed, it settles into stillness, reflecting the sky above with perfect clarity. In the same way, purification begins when we stop adding turbulence to our inner world. The less you hold on to, the clearer you see. Elimination also teaches humility. It reminds us that we are not infinite containers meant to carry everything, but limited vessels that must be emptied to stay pure. Many people cling to ideas, possessions, and identities that no longer serve their path simply because they fear emptiness. But emptiness is not something to fear, it is a sacred space where new understanding can emerge. In Zen philosophy, the empty cup is ready to be filled with wisdom, but the full cup cannot receive anything new. To eliminate what is unnecessary is to accept that not everything belongs in your life, not every habit deserves your energy, and not every thought deserves your attention. This act of selective removal refines your focus and strengthens your awareness. It allows you to live with intention rather than compulsion. Purification through elimination is a lifelong discipline. It is not about drastic renunciation or rejecting the world. It is about alignment. You begin to ask simple but powerful questions. Does this bring peace or confusion? Does this thought make me lighter or heavier? Does this path serve my purpose or distract me from it? Through such self-inquiry, you gradually clear away what clouds your perception. When the unnecessary fades, you begin to sense the quiet joy that was always present, beneath the clutter, beneath the striving, beneath the noise. The true self does not need adornment or validation, it simply needs space to breathe. So when you start eliminating, do it gently, do it consciously, and do it with reverence. You are not losing anything real, you are returning to what was real all along. Excuses are among the most subtle and powerful obstacles to personal growth. They often disguise themselves as reasons, logical, harmless explanations that justify inaction. Yet beneath every excuse lies fear, fear of failure, fear of discomfort, fear of judgment. When we tell ourselves, "I don't have time," or "I'm not ready yet," we are not describing reality, we are protecting our comfort zone. The habit of excuses builds invisible walls around our potential. These walls are not made of steel or stone, but of words, beliefs, and self-deception. The moment you accept an excuse as truth, you stop evolving. And the longer you live in the comfort of excuses, the more natural that paralysis feels. Growth demands courage, but excuses whisper softly, promising safety. What they never reveal is that this safety comes at the cost of freedom. Excuses are learned behaviors, patterns conditioned through repetition. From a young age, many people are taught to fear mistakes rather than to learn from them. As a result, they grow into adults who defend their weaknesses instead of improving them. "It's not my fault" becomes a shield against responsibility, but responsibility is not punishment, it is power. The moment you take full responsibility for your life, your choices, and your mindset, you reclaim your ability to change. Excuses, on the other hand, hand over that power to circumstance. They make external forces the master of your destiny. Life will always present obstacles, but what defines a person is not what stands in their way, it is how they respond. The warrior's path, as taught in both martial arts and spiritual disciplines, is to meet every challenge without retreating into justification. The more you confront your excuses, the weaker they become. Another danger of excuses is that they distort truth. They create a story, a narrative that allows us to live comfortably within our limitations. This story becomes our identity, and soon, we forget it is fiction. The mind begins to say, "This is just who I am." But that is not truth, that is a habit. The person who constantly says, "I can't," or "It's too late for me," has convinced themselves of their own smallness. Yet every master, every enlightened being, was once a beginner who refused to tell themselves such lies. The key is not to eliminate failure, but to eliminate the illusion that failure defines you. When you stop using excuses as shields, life begins to open up. You realize that pain, mistakes, and uncertainty are not enemies, they are teachers. Each moment of difficulty reveals where your strength is being forged. Excuses, in contrast, keep you in the classroom of stagnation, where lessons are repeated but never learned. To break the habit of excuses, one must cultivate awareness and honesty. Excuses thrive in unconsciousness, in moments when we react rather than reflect. When you feel resistance, pause and ask yourself, what am I protecting right now? Most of the time, you will find that it is not your dignity or values you are defending, but your comfort. Recognizing this is the first step to transformation. The practice of martial arts teaches this principle through the body. When faced with resistance, you breathe through it, you do not retreat. The same applies to the mind. Every time you choose action over excuse, you strengthen your discipline. Discipline is freedom, because it releases you from the control of fear. Eventually, the need to justify or defend fades, replaced by silent confidence. You act because action itself becomes your meditation. You move forward, not because the path is easy, but because you have remembered who you are beyond the limits you once created. The past is both a teacher and a prison, depending on how we relate to it. Many people carry their past as though it were a sacred burden, replaying moments of pain, failure, or betrayal until those memories become their identity. But the truth is, the past is not meant to be carried, it is meant to be learned from and released. What has already happened has completed its purpose. Its lesson is eternal, but its pain is temporary, provided you allow it to flow through you. The tragedy is that most people never let it go. They trap themselves in an endless dialogue with what cannot be changed. Every what if, every I should have, becomes another chain around the heart. It is not time that keeps us stuck, it is our unwillingness to let time move on. The mind holds on to the past because it finds comfort in familiarity, even if that familiarity brings suffering. But liberation begins the moment we decide to stop revisiting old wounds and start creating space for new life to enter. To let go of the past is not to deny it, but to transform your relationship with it. You cannot erase memory, nor should you, but you can stop feeding it with emotion. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones. Each stone represents an old regret, a lost opportunity, a mistake, or an unhealed hurt. You carry it because you believe it defines who you are, but in truth, it only limits how far you can walk. The path of freedom begins when you start placing those stones down, one by one. With each stone you release, your body becomes lighter, your breath becomes deeper, and your spirit begins to move freely again. You start to see that the weight you thought was destiny was actually self-imposed. The past can guide you, yes, but only if you stop mistaking it for your home. You are not meant to live there. You are meant to visit, learn, and return stronger to the present. The reason the past feels so heavy is that we attach meaning to it. We define ourselves by our stories. I was hurt, I was abandoned, I failed, but these are labels, not truths. A person who holds on to pain becomes shaped by it, while the one who releases pain becomes shaped by wisdom. The difference lies not in what happened, but in what we choose to remember and how we interpret it. Every event in your life can either be a scar or a source of strength. The event itself is neutral. It is your perspective that gives it power. The great teachers of the East remind us that suffering does not come from the event, but from our attachment to the memory of it. The wound heals when you stop reopening it. The past cannot hurt you unless you invite it back in every day. When you begin to observe your memories without judgment, without reliving their emotions, you start to extract their essence, their lesson. And in that process, the weight that once bent your back begins to dissolve into understanding. Learning to let go of the past requires acceptance, patience, and compassion, especially for yourself. We often cling to guilt because we believe that by doing so we are taking responsibility. But guilt is not responsibility, it is stagnation. True responsibility is learning from what happened and choosing not to repeat it. Forgiveness of yourself and of others is the medicine that frees you from the illusion of time. To forgive does not mean to forget or condone. It means to release your need for revenge, even against yourself. It means to recognize that you too were growing, learning, and limited in understanding. Every soul on this path has stumbled. The difference between the wise and the weary is that the wise learn to walk lighter. They bow to the past, thank it for its teaching, and then continue onward. When you carry less, you move faster. When you release the past, the present unfolds its beauty. It is only in this moment, this eternal now, that life truly exists. And yet most people miss it, trapped in the echoes of what no longer is. One of the most subtle forms of suffering comes from the desire to be understood by others. We long for others to see our hearts, to acknowledge our intentions, to validate our experiences. This desire is natural. It comes from the human need for connection and belonging. Yet when it becomes an attachment, it turns into a prison for the soul. The moment your peace depends on whether others understand you, you surrender your inner stability to the unpredictable opinions of the world. People perceive not what is but what their own minds allow them to see. You could speak truth, and someone would still call it false. You could act with love, and someone would still judge it as pride. If you spend your life trying to correct every misunderstanding, you will exhaust yourself and lose your essence. The wise person learns that not being understood is not a failure, it is freedom. For when you no longer chase approval, you begin to live from your own center, grounded in self-awareness rather than public acceptance. The need to be understood is often rooted in insecurity. Deep down, we want confirmation that our path, our thoughts, and our emotions are valid. But in seeking that confirmation from others, we forget to give it to ourselves. The journey of self-mastery requires deep inner trust, the kind that does not waver when others question your direction. Imagine walking through a forest at night with only a lantern in your hand. The light reaches just a few steps ahead, not the entire path, yet you trust those steps. The opinions of others are like voices in the distance, calling out directions you cannot see. If you stop every few steps to listen and change course, you will never arrive anywhere. Silence, on the other hand, teaches you to trust your own light. You begin to move not because others agree, but because you know what feels aligned with your truth. The less you depend on being understood, the stronger your inner voice becomes, calm, steady, and unwavering even amid confusion. Those who walk the path of awareness often face misunderstanding, even ridicule. Throughout history, every person who sought to live authentically, from philosophers to spiritual teachers, has been misunderstood by those around them. The reason is simple: truth challenges comfort. When your actions are guided by deeper insight, they will not always make sense to those still living on the surface. This is why inner peace must come from within. If you seek to explain your every motive, you will waste your energy defending what needs no defense. Silence becomes your greatest strength, not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of mastery. When you are misunderstood, do not rush to correct, observe. The need to prove yourself comes from the ego, but the ability to remain still in misunderstanding comes from wisdom. Over time the truth reveals itself, and those who misjudged you will either awaken to it or drift away. Either way, your peace remains untouched. There is a deeper beauty in not being fully understood. It keeps you humble and reminds you of life's mystery. The human mind cannot completely grasp another soul, it can only interpret. To expect perfect understanding from others is to expect what is impossible. Each person listens through the filter of their experiences, fears, and beliefs. Therefore, misunderstandings are not personal, they are reflections of perception. When you accept this, compassion arises. You stop taking things so personally and start seeing the shared struggle in everyone's attempt to be seen and heard. You realize that just as others may not fully understand you, you too do not fully understand them. And in this realization, patience grows. You begin to communicate not to convince but to share. You begin to listen not to reply, but to connect. When the need to be understood fades, the heart opens wider, not to be seen but to simply see. And in that state of silent clarity, you discover a freedom that cannot be disturbed by misunderstanding or misjudgment, a freedom that comes from standing firmly in your own truth, regardless of who recognizes it. Control is one of the deepest illusions of the human mind. It gives us the sense that we can shape the world to our liking, prevent pain, and secure happiness. Yet the more we try to control life, the more we suffer. Why? Because life by its nature is fluid. It moves like water, unpredictable and ever-changing. To try to control it is like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grasp, the faster it slips away. When we insist that things must unfold exactly as we wish, we create tension within ourselves. That tension manifests as anxiety, frustration, and disappointment. It blinds us to the beauty of what is because our focus is trapped in what should be. Control is born from fear, fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, fear of vulnerability. And yet it is only by letting go of control that we can truly experience freedom. The paradox is that the less you try to control life, the more peacefully and naturally it begins to flow. The desire to control everything often stems from a lack of trust, not just in others but in life itself. We build plans, expectations, and rigid structures around our days because unpredictability makes us feel unsafe. We fear that without control, chaos will reign. But what if the chaos we fear is not chaos at all but a deeper order we have not yet learned to understand? Look at nature. The trees do not control the wind, yet they dance with it. The river does not control the stones, yet it flows gracefully around them. The sun rises and sets without resistance. This is the wisdom of non-control, the understanding that harmony exists not in domination but in cooperation. When you surrender the illusion of control, you begin to move in rhythm with life rather than against it. You realize that you are part of a vast and intelligent flow, one that knows where to take you even when you cannot see the destination. When we try to control people, outcomes, or emotions, we imprison ourselves in endless conflict. We become reactive, attempting to force others to behave according to our expectations. But control over others is never true control, it is manipulation born from insecurity. The more you try to manage how others think or act, the more resistance you create. You begin to lose the very peace you are trying to preserve. This also applies to controlling emotions. Many people believe strength means suppressing anger, sadness, or fear, but in truth, strength lies in awareness, not repression. Emotions are waves. They rise, they fall, they pass. When you observe them without trying to control them, you learn their lessons and let them dissolve naturally. The moment you stop fighting life, you begin to flow with it. Inner mastery is not found in the ability to control every situation, but in the ability to remain balanced, no matter how situations change. Letting go of control does not mean becoming passive or careless, it means shifting from resistance to responsiveness. Instead of saying, "This should not be happening," you learn to ask, "What is life trying to teach me here?" In martial arts, this principle is beautifully embodied. The skilled practitioner does not resist force with force but redirects it. They do not impose control, they harmonize with the opponent's energy, using its momentum to create balance. The same applies to life. Every time you release control, you make space for intuition, creativity, and grace to guide you. You begin to trust that life is not against you, but for you. Things may not always go according to plan, but often they unfold exactly as they should. And in that realization, peace arises, not because everything is certain, but because you have learned to dance with uncertainty. When control dissolves, trust blooms, and through trust, life reveals its hidden wisdom, showing you that what you once tried to force was already unfolding in perfect timing. In the end, the path of inner transformation is not a journey of addition, but of subtraction. It is not about becoming more, it is about becoming less attached, less fearful, less controlled by noise, and less enslaved by the illusions we've created. The world teaches us to chase, to collect, to prove, but the soul whispers the opposite. It asks us to release, to simplify, to return. When you begin to eliminate what no longer serves your growth, the comparisons, excuses, the weight of the past, the need for understanding, and the illusion of control, you begin to uncover a quieter, deeper truth, that peace was never something to be gained. It was always within you, waiting beneath the clutter. The process of letting go is not easy. It requires patience, honesty, and courage. But as you begin to remove the unnecessary, you start to feel lighter, not because life becomes simpler, but because you become clearer. Your energy stops scattering toward what drains you, and starts flowing toward what nurtures you. You begin to see that life does not need to be controlled, only observed. The people who walk through life with grace are not those who have mastered everything, they are those who have surrendered to what is fully awake and fully present. When you quiet the noise within, the wisdom of the universe becomes audible. In that stillness, you begin to sense the rhythm of life, gentle, consistent, and profoundly intelligent. You realize that everything has its time, and every ending is a beginning in disguise. The storms you once resisted were never sent to break you, but to cleanse you. The losses you mourned were not punishments, but invitations to rediscover what truly matters. And the peace you sought in the world was never missing, it was simply buried under layers of resistance and desire. So, walk gently through life. Speak less, listen more. Expect less, appreciate more, control less, trust more. The art of living is the art of letting go, not in defeat, but in wisdom. When you finally understand this, you will no longer chase peace, because peace will chase you. You will no longer seek purpose, because purpose will unfold naturally through your stillness. The path will reveal itself not through striving, but through surrender. And in that surrender, you will discover the quiet power that has always been your truest nature, the power of simply being.